Hi everyone, nice to see you all. On the face of it, my 10 or 15 minutes this afternoon could have been a pretty unpleasant prospect for all of us. Very many of you heard my HN update back at our investor conference, which was in the middle of November. And in the few short weeks since then, not very much could have happened, right? I had the prospect of regurgitating the whole thing again. Well, not so, it seems. While we were talking about all things district heating, the Prime Minister on that very day was unveiling his 10-point plan for the green industrial revolution, telling us how we're going to build back better. Just a couple of days after that, on the 25th of November, we had the National Infrastructure Strategy released. Shortly after that, there was the 6th carbon budget. And these were just the ones that had the pretty front covers that made my slide look good. I could easily have mentioned to you the energy white paper that came out on the 14th of December, or the Treasury's interim net zero review just a couple of days later, still on the 17th of December. So let's reflect on that way to work in the depths of the pandemic, in the month where we struck a deal with Brussels on Brexit and then completed a transition. And in those few small weeks before Christmas, we saw this weight of joined up, coherent policy announcements with some real specificity on what's required to meet net zero. And super importantly to us and to all of you, every one of them commented on the role private sector investment could be required to play. If the 10-point plan itself forgivably lacks some policy context and implementation detail, then its scale and its ambition was awesome and impressive. The NIS included some detail on principles for engaging with private investment, spoke about the creation of a national infrastructure bank to co-invest alongside the private sector, while the 6th carbon budget recommended a 78% reduction in emissions by 2035 and calculated that if we were to do so, £50 billion worth of investment would be required every single year. The energy white paper put consumers at its heart, and in the context of heat specifically, forecast among very many other things that heat pump installations would be up to 600,000 a year by 2028. And ahead of the HMT net zero report expected in spring, the interim review discussed how much of the finance required can come from the private sector, can come from organizations just like yours. So all of this brilliant material came out. I'm sure many of you are getting to grips with it even now. Absolutely unambiguous intent in all of it, driven by the really compelling need to see us transition to net zero. And that's why I shouldn't begrudge trolling through the same few slides again, and frankly, you shouldn't begrudge listening to me either. So let's crack on. All of those previous documents were great examples of current government policy and government thinking that absolutely reasserts our position as world leaders in decarbonisation. But at a practical level, and with the immediacy required to develop our heat networks in particular, the role of local government is potentially greater still. While local authorities themselves are not infrequently network sponsors and owners, they are always an important stakeholder and actor at some level. They can provide great local leadership, encourage buy-in and engagement from their citizens. They have a mandate to pursue local economic growth and projects that will see jobs created. And they're interested in all vectors of energy, heat and buildings, of course, but transport and power too. They've got fantastic local competencies in areas such as planning and procurement, and have a strong record of engaging with public sector development and finance partners. So what of heat networks specifically? This was a slide we showed you last year, and I'm hoping before very long we can change this 2% number. There are currently 14,000 heat networks in the UK providing heat and hot water to around about 500,000 consumers. So as I say, that's 2% of heat delivery today. Conservatively, we think that's a number that can trend towards 18 or 20% with the requisite government support and investment from the private sector. Heat networks are an absolutely vital part of the low-cost pathway to meeting decarbonisation targets. So in this specific context, what forms can government support take? While the Heat Network Delivery Unit has been funding early network development in local authorities across England and Wales, and it has been since 2013. HNIP, the Heat Network Investment Project, was piloted by BHIVE back in 2017 and latterly managed by Triple Point, their delivery partner. That offers gap funding by way of grants and loans for the commercialisation and construction of heat network projects. When that comes to an end in 2022, it will be followed by the Green Heat Network Fund. That will provide a further £270 million worth of capital grants over the 3 years from spring 22 through to 2025. But aside from those direct financial stimuli, BHIVE is delivering on plans for a long-term market framework as well. That will include the appointment of an experienced regulator at its heart and a focus on consumer protection and making the sector particularly attractive to investors. It's also consulting right now on energy zoning following some successful pilots. Zoning is about conferring a duty on local planning authorities to create energy master plans that determine which heat and energy efficiency policies should apply in a particular area, and has the potential to deliver the levels of demand assurance to network sponsors, developers, and of course investors. I'm not going to read this slide out to you in full. I feel I've done that very many times and you've all heard it from me before. I hope all the same you'll forgive me for deep diving into HNIP a little bit further, as it's our particular area of expertise. What I did want to impress on you today, and why I picked it out in italics, is the role HNIP must play in creating a self-sustaining heat network market. And that's really why we're here today. I want to pass you on to my colleagues from Amberside. They're talking to you about BHIVE and the onboarding process for BHIVE. BHIVE is designed to facilitate one of the important conditions of those self-sustaining markets. It's the easy access to private capital from experienced, capable investors like you all. We will soon be announcing the outcome of round 7 before very long, I hope. That will see the value of the awards increase from the 125 million you can see on the screen right now to what we hope will be more than 160 million. And when the HNIP Investment Committee sits in February, in just a couple of weeks' time, to discuss the round 8 projects, we expect that number to increase again to as much as 200 million. Until then, the projects that have been awarded funding up to and including round 6 are, when they are built out, going to be delivering around about 320 gigawatt hours of decarbonised heat annually across a pipe network of around about 120 kilometres in length. That will see decarbonised heat provided to about 40,000 homes, and that 125 million of grant and loan funding is unlocking capex expected of around about 338 million pounds. We call that slide the numbers that matter, but actually increasingly I think these are the important numbers that we all want to be focusing on. The Local Government Association approximated that something like 750,000 jobs could be created in the transition to a new green economy. They think too that about 81,000 of those could be generated in heat networks alone. In our small way, with projects that are already in their construction phases, we've had numbers from Leeds City Council that really help contextualise that. This year, in the scheme that you can see on this image, more than 430 people have got new jobs building out heat networks here, including 36 apprentices. So small numbers, absolutely trending in the right direction, and something about which we think we're rightly proud. More than just provide funding, we have a mandate to seek to accelerate the professionalisation of the market. And in that respect, we've published template sales, operations and maintenance contracts, what we call our SOMs. They are entirely free to download and use. And what's really exciting is we're seeing real world examples today of where those contracts are already being used, saving projects time, saving projects money, increasing standardization and professionalization. We've also developed a standardized due diligence set to provide sponsors and investors with a better understanding of the due diligence requirements of lenders and investors like you, and in time to provide you with consistent, high caliber investment ready proposals. Also available to you is a strong and growing pipeline with details on the projects being supported by HNIP and the HNDU that have an aggregate capex today of around about £2 billion. There is a URL there. This pipeline is always available to you online. These were the figures that were correct up to the third quarter of 2020. And included within that pipeline of projects is a really interesting mix of diverse generation technologies. When we started this project back in 2018, in our first funding round, we saw that almost 50% of the projects coming forward were premised around natural gas-fired CHP. As you might hope and expect, we've latterly seen some really exciting technologies: clean, green heat pumps, energy from waste connections, industrial sources of waste heat, and in a couple of instances up in the northeast with Gateshead Council and with Durham County Council, really exciting deep geothermal schemes drawing heat from our legacy mine workings. This is the last slide from me before I hand over to Amberside colleagues. It's another one that I have unapologetically stolen directly from Bayes and from John Saunders, who you'll remember presented to you. It's a real favourite of mine. It's what he calls his "you said we did" slide. I probably should have changed it to "you said Bayes did," but hopefully you'll forgive me that. This is a proof, if it were needed, that a good amount of policy and strategic thinking has gone towards addressing the needs and wants of you all as investors, given the critically important role you all play in bringing these plans to fruition. We have heard and responded to the fact that there's not enough projects. Well, actually, as you can see now from that pipeline slide that I just gave you, there's a permanently visible pipeline that's already up to £2 billion worth of capex and growing all the time. Projects aren't big enough, but actually on our watch over the course of the last couple of years, we've seen projects grow from an average 12 million capex up to 20 million and growing still. Projects all look different and the cost of due diligence is high. Well, there's increasing standardization of technologies, of commercial models and delivery models, and now standardization to contracts being used by the projects, and a growing understanding of what's expected from them in our standardized due diligence set. There's a lack of regulation in the market. Well, yes, that's true, but in that market framework that I mentioned to you, the prospect of an experienced regulator being appointed by 2022 is a near-term reality. It's been said that there is no demand assurance and there's too much connection risk. Well, as I said earlier, we now have this zoning consultation as well in 2021. So this is still a young market in its relative infancy. It's a market still with lots of challenges, but so many positive steps being taken, including bringing us right up to date now, the challenge that hitherto there's been no easy access for private capital, and that's precisely the void that we want BHIVE to fill. So I'm going to sign off. I'm going to thank you all for coming along this afternoon, for your interest in BHIVE so far, and invite Richard Turner to give you a bit of insight into how it might work and to walk you through the onboarding process. Rich.
Great, thanks, Ken. I'm going to try and share my screen. It's the first time I've done it, so hopefully you can see that. So I'm Richard Turner. I'm a director at Amberside Advisors, and we're part of the delivery partner consortium that's delivering HNIP, and we're also managing BHIVE. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is and how it operates, and then a colleague of mine, Harriet's going to talk a little bit more detail about the actual portal and the selection questionnaire approach. So bear with me. Try and go on to the next slide if I can. So what is BHIVE? It is an OJU compliant procurement platform, and it's actually a dynamic purchasing system, and some of you may be aware of what that is, others maybe less so. It's a bit like an old framework except under a DPS, there's more flexibility for suppliers to join the DPS at any point and to leave the DPS at any point during its term. So it's not like a framework where there was a one shot to get on it and then you were on it for the duration of the framework. It is open to suppliers to join at any time. It's got a potential value of around 150 million. And we've set it up to allow public sector heat network developers to, in England and Wales, to raise investment and asset finance, and also importantly, alongside the investment, investment-related services. So the skills that experienced investors bring to public sector bodies who are developing heat networks to help them to develop those projects and take them through to financial close and beyond. It is separate from the heat network investment project, but it's been designed to work alongside it and any future government heat network schemes. BHIVE are currently consulting on the Green Heat Network Fund, for example, and it's expected that BHIVE will be able to work alongside it. The DPS runs to March 23, but BHIVE have an option to extend it, I think, for two one-year periods. And BHIVE are the administrative authority as it's an OG procured platform, but Triple Point managed the DPS as agent. And in fact, Amberside will be doing much of that work as part of the delivery partner group. Okay. Hope you can see the next slide. Why are we procuring a DPS? The primary reason is to enable market growth, which is going to require significant amounts of private capital. There's been figures quoted of up to £30 billion up to 2050 to develop district heating heat network market to the level that's required to meet the government's targets. And Ken mentioned the self-sustaining heat network market, which is one of the primary aims of HNIP and will be of future government schemes. That the ultimate aim is to get the heat network market to stand on its own 2 feet without needing future government support. Ken referred to the standardised due diligence set we've issued, sales and operations maintenance set, SONs. We're also attempting to professionalise the market by requiring projects coming through the HNIP scheme to have proper financial models, for example. And the DPS will allow public sector bodies an efficient way to access private capital through an OGIP compliant platform and for funders to access opportunities. You can join it. Well, for the funder point of view, it's split into 2 lots. Lot 1 is the equity finance lot, and lot 2 is the asset finance lot. And lot 1 comes with the provision of equity related investment services. We should stress that it's not a procurement vehicle for procuring design, construction operations, or standalone professional services. It is to procure investment and the services that go with that investment, structuring, financing, and development skills that an investment partner can bring. You can use it. So all public sector bodies in England and Wales, it doesn't cover Scotland, which includes central government departments, arm's length bodies, executive agencies, devolved administrations in Wales, local authorities, NHS bodies, universities, colleges, schools, and further education providers. So all public sector bodies in England and Wales can use it if they're procuring and developing a heat network. So just talk a little bit about how it works. Essentially, there's a 2-stage process to the DPS. The stage we're doing now is the onboarding of funders to the 2 lots. Once we have a critical mass of funders, we'll then open up the DPS to contracting authorities, as they're called, which are the local authorities and other public sector bodies who want to use it. They will then bring forward projects, and essentially the main work under the DPS is through the competitions that contracting authorities raise. So the contracting authority will bring forward their project. We will support them in helping bring that to market. For the equity lot, essentially they'll issue a tender pack, which will be the bid response requirements, evaluation criteria, an investment summary, and the project development agreement, which is the agreement which will regulate the arrangement, or legal arrangement between the contracting authority and the selected investor, and that includes a draft shareholders agreement as an appendix. And the asset finance tender pack, again, there'll be a bid response requirements, evaluation criteria, and an asset finance term sheet that lessors will bid. And as I mentioned, Triple Point will manage the DPS as agent for BHIVE, onboarding funders and supporting contracting authorities using the DPS. We want to make sure that projects that come to market are suitable and sufficiently well developed, and that's part of our role, is working with contracting authorities to do that. I won't go through this in detail, but essentially this is just a map of how contracting authorities will bring forward projects. So you need to get their own internal approvals and budgets and define their requirements. They're able to carry out some pre-market engagement, and then they'll finalise the tender pack, issue it to tenderers, periods for clarification, final and written responses, final bids, and then they select a bidder. The DPS competition phase is open to all suppliers within that lot. There isn't a sort of two-stage process as you get in some procurements, but given that we're talking about procuring investment or asset finance, we think that competition process will be an efficient way for both contracting authorities and funders to see opportunities. In terms of timing, so as I said, we're currently onboarding funders, and there's a number of funders who've registered already on the portal and are going through the process. Stage 2 will then be the customer launch, and we're expecting to go fully live under the DPS for contracting authorities sometime in February or March, once we've got that critical mass, hopefully in February. There isn't a sort of specific pipeline of projects with timelines, but Ken's already referred to the overall pipeline. We're also engaged closely with BHIVE, and in particular the HNDU Heat Network Delivery Unit, who fund early stage feasibility, looking at those pipelines, identifying projects that we can bring forward. There are already a number of projects under HNIP who are applying for funding, who have identified an interest in BHIVE. So we expect to work with those contracting authorities over the coming months to bring projects forward. And on that note, I'll hand over to Harriet.
Thanks, Richard. Let me just share my screen. You should be able to see my screen now. So yeah, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the application process and the SQ. So the initial sort of system, once you've been onto the BHIVE website, will take you through to the Pro Contract website, which is the portal that we are hosting this DPS on. At that point, you'll be able to do just a very quick registration if you're not already registered on Pro Contract. And then as part of that, you'll be able to begin your response. And then sort of the key question that you need to ask yourself before starting to complete the SQ is what entity is going to be providing the funding and who is going to be signing the DPSA agreement, which is the Dynamic Purchasing Systems Agreement. There's a lot of text on this slide, and this is more one for you to take away and have a think about when you're coming to apply for the DPS. But I just wanted to reiterate that if it isn't immediately obvious what pathway you should go down, it's worth arranging a call with us to discuss which you think is the most appropriate given your circumstance. So the three different options are: one is a single entity, so this would just be the funding entity completing the SQ. A second scenario could be a lead, which would be the lead party would be the one providing the funding, and then subcontracting the services if you're applying under Lot 1. And then the final scenario is a group of economic operators. We don't see this as being a particularly likely scenario, but potentially you may be creating a new company where there would be joint and several liability, and that would be how you need to complete the SQ under that circumstance. So in terms of the standard SQ questions, these apply to both lot 1 and 2 and can be broken down into these various sections. I'm going to take you through the actual system shortly, so I'll go into those in a bit more detail. But the key one that I wanted to raise to everyone's attention initially is section 7, which are the requirements for financial standing for the company applying. So we require a Dun & Bradstreet risk indicator score of 2 or lower and a credit report being uploaded to the system. If these aren't available, then you are able to provide your audited accounts or a guarantor if that is also required. And then apart from this, there are specific questions under each of the 2 lots that Richard mentioned that are available for the equity finance and the asset finance. These are focusing around the experience that you've got in the industry and the ability to deploy capital. So that is what I have put on the slides, which will hopefully be useful to refer back to. But for now, I'm going to now share the Proactis website, which you should be able to see now. So once you've logged on and made your expression of interest, you will be able to enter the specific round of the BHIVE. As Richard said earlier, the DPS is available until March 2023 with the possibility to extend. However, we will be intermittently closing rounds over the coming weeks in order to review the submissions. So when you log onto the system, there's no need to worry about the fact that if you've automatically gone into the next round, that's nothing for you to worry about. It doesn't mean that you've missed a deadline or anything like that. It just means that we are reviewing submissions. So once you go through to that, you'll be taken through to this DPS page, which this gives the links of the key kind of funder provider guidance and the agreements, some of which Richard mentioned earlier. So this should give you more information based upon what we've discussed today, but also some further guidance as to how to complete the SQ, and then also give further insight into how the further competitions will be run once the contracting authorities are onboarded to BHIVE. And then from here, you can see that there are various sets of questions that need to be filled out. The system lets you know which questions are mandatory, and it won't allow you to submit your response until all of the mandatory questions have been completed. So the initial set of questions which need to be answered by everybody is this standard selection questionnaire, which these all follow sort of general government procurement exercises. So it's just general company information to begin with. And then as part of that, you will be required to explain which avenue you've gone down in terms of applying to the DPS. So this is what I was describing earlier, as whether you're a single entity, whether you're planning on being a group of economic operators, or whether you'll be subcontracting any of the services. So within these questions, you will need to provide that information, including for the subcontractor, any information for like the general information about the company, which is included as an attachment under this final question. For those bidding as groups of economic operators, there are separate SQ questions that will need to be completed under that circumstance. So these are the provider 2 and 3 standard questions here on this screen. But yeah, those are only needed for groups of economic operators. Then as part of the standard SQ, there are 2 sections on exclusionary grounds, which need to be completed, and then some sections on modern slavery, insurance, and cyber essentials. A few of these will ask you to upload your certificates, and you can do that within the system, is just attaching copies of the certificates that you hold, and then stating that you comply with the supplier code of conduct. Anything that is displayed as sort of, for example, in this one, the supplier code of conduct, there will be links to the specific government websites that list out what that means and what is required under that specific code. The same for the mandatory exclusions. Again, there'll be links that list off those before you need to say whether or not your company adheres to those. For the financial standing, this is where you will submit your Dun & Bradstreet indicator and report, and provide that information for a guarantor if that is applicable. If you are applying and you think you will be needing a guarantor, we ask that you contact us through the messaging system, and we can provide you with the guarantor relationship part. So then moving on, we then ask you to look at declaring which lot you'll be bidding for, and then finally accepting the terms and conditions. So the terms and conditions in this instance is the Dynamic Purchasing Systems Agreement, which will be attached here for you to review. And then if you can state the name of the person signing this, the signing doesn't happen at this point. The signing would happen once you have been submitted successfully to the DPS, and you'll be contacted separately about that. So that's the standard questions which everybody needs to answer for lot 1 and lot 2. And then depending on which lot you are applying for, you will then need to opt in or out of the specific lots, and then you'll be taken through to the questions that relate to those. So just taking lot 1 as an example for the equity finance, here you will be asked a couple of questions just to give your experience in the energy infrastructure industry. We just ask that you give a couple of examples that include sort of capex size, where the project was, how it's related to the energy infrastructure market. And then we ask you to provide examples of any of the services that are mentioned as part of this. They're included in this SQ, but are also in the funding provider guidance. But yeah, to give examples of those services that are requested, and then just answering some simple questions about the amount and source of the capital that you'll be coming forward with. None of these should be too complicated to sort of answer, and we've limited responses, I think, to 1,000 words, so we're not expecting large streams of text about anything, but just, yeah, some key examples of experience within the industry. And under the asset finance lot, it's very similar sort of questions, asking about experience, but then also asking whether you have public sector lease documents available, and also whether you're able to take on residual risk in lease transactions. So all of this just builds a kind of picture of the type of investments that you have partaken in before, and whether it is suitable for the BHIVE DPS specifically. So those are the key kind of sections within the DPS online. And yeah, so you will just go through each of the various questions, and then once you've done that, you are able to submit your response, which at this point, these lights here that are red would go green, and you would submit that. And then we will review your application, and we'll let you know if there's any further information required at that stage. And then you will be informed of whether you have been successful or not within 10 working days. And then from that, as I said previously, then you'll be contacted about signing the DPSA. So that's a quick run through of how the system works from an online perspective. And now I'd like to open it up to any questions. If there's anything specifically on the SQ that anybody is currently struggling with, or thinks that they want to know more about, or if there are any questions for Ken and Richard on more of the DPS in general, or perhaps the pipeline. Thank you.
Thanks, Harriet. I've not had any specific questions sent through to me. So I guess if anybody would like to ask a question, if you unmute, I can see your it flashes up on my screen, and we can take questions one at a time. I've just had one come through actually. So we're an investment advisor to a Jersey listed fund. Will there be any issues with the location of the company's registration?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think a Jersey listed fund would cause a problem. I'll double check, but no, I don't think that would cause a problem.
Okay, great. We'll double check that and get back to you though. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Do get in touch if you have any questions.